A cold wind sweeps across the streets of Canada, slipping beneath doorways, coiling around bus stops, and crawling across the concrete where countless people try to sleep without shelter. It is a wind that does more than sting the skin. It slides into the spirit, draining warmth, draining strength, draining hope. Anyone who pauses long enough to notice can feel it. Survival, for many, is not a certainty but a daily negotiation with the elements, with exhaustion, with despair. For thousands living without a home, every breath becomes a reminder of how fragile a human life truly is, how quickly stability can unravel, how quietly a person can be pushed to the margins. And for those who dare to look closely, homelessness is not a number in a report nor a distant social problem. It is a mirror, a reflection of the systems we built, the choices we made, the compassion we withheld. It forces a difficult question into our minds. How did this become ordinary? How did human suffering blend so seamlessly into the background of everyday life? This is why a documentary about the homeless is not just important, it is essential. It breaks through the silence that has grown too thick, too comfortable, too easy. It refuses to let these lives be swallowed by shadows or softened by indifference. It demands that we look, that we listen, that we feel. It pulls humanity back into focus and reminds us that acknowledgement is the first step toward change. Only when we face the truth, unflinching, unfiltered, undeniable, can we begin to build a future where no one is left to fight the cold alone. Canada, the winter and the coldness of indifference. Along the sidewalks of Toronto, people press their backs against the cold stone walls beneath bank awnings, trying to fold themselves into the architecture as if invisibility might offer a small measure of safety. At bus shelters, they curl tightly into their coats, drawing their knees to their chests in the hope that the thin plexiglass might shield them not only from the biting wind, but from the unspoken judgment in the eyes of those who pass quickly by. Some avert their gaze, others pretend not to see at all. And still, the people in those shelters remain silent silhouettes against the frozen streets. Meanwhile, in Montreal, winter shows no mercy. Snow piles relentlessly on top of makeshift tents, pressing down with a weight that the flimsy poles were never meant to bear. The fabric sags and groans in the wind, threatening to collapse at any moment onto the person huddled inside. They sit awake through the night, fighting exhaustion, because in temperatures like these, slipping into sleep can be more dangerous than staying awake. Each hour becomes a battle between the body and the cold, between survival and surrender. People are pushed toward the edge by circumstances they could never predict: an abrupt job loss, a sudden illness, a rent increase that spirals beyond affordability. And once they reach that edge, society often pushes them further, not with malice, but with indifference. Looking away becomes easier. Convincing oneself that someone else will help becomes more comfortable than confronting the truth. What they need is not loose change dropped into a cup without a moment of eye contact. What they need, what they crave, is recognition. A warm word spoken with sincerity. A human moment that tells them they are still visible, still valued, still part of this world. A simple acknowledgement that their life has meaning. Sometimes, the smallest gesture becomes a lifeline. A smile that carries no pity. A conversation that reminds them they still exist in someone's thoughts. A cup of warm water placed gently into shaking hands. These moments may seem insignificant to those who give them, but to someone standing on the edge of despair, they can be the difference between giving up and holding on for one more day. Los Angeles, a silent collapse in a city of lights. Across the border, the crisis in Los Angeles unfolds like another painful chapter in the larger American story. The city that markets itself as a beacon of dreams now carries a quiet tragedy beneath its glow. Official reports list 72,308 people experiencing homelessness in 2025. But anyone who walks its streets knows the true number is far higher, hidden in alley shadows, tucked behind storefronts, or scattered across sidewalks that were never meant to be bedrooms. Behind every statistic is a human life that did not simply fall, but was pushed by a system that rewards stability only until the day it is lost. Many of the people sleeping on concrete tonight were paying rent just a year ago. They were workers, parents, neighbors, people who believed they had a grip on their lives. Then came one lost job that arrived without warning, one medical bill that insurance refused to cover, one sudden rent increase that turned a paycheck into an impossible equation. That's all it takes to unravel the fragile thread anchoring a person to safety. Homelessness in Los Angeles is not a moral failing. It is a collision between rising costs and human vulnerability. Under the overpasses, in the forgotten alleyways behind major boulevards, small communities form out of necessity and survival. People gather in loose circles, arranging bags, worn shoes, and fading photographs, little altars of the lives they once had. Some hold on to old pictures of better times, gripping them as if memory itself could offer warmth when the night turns cold. These makeshift families share what they have: blankets, chargers, stories, cigarettes, silence. Isolation may be what led them here, but connection is what helps them endure. The city's emergency system buckles under the weight of the crisis. In a single year, there were more than 23,000 emergency calls related to homelessness. Each one a plea for help, a moment of fear, exhaustion, confusion, or danger. Many of these calls are rooted in preventable suffering: untreated wounds, unmanaged diabetes, psychotic breaks, dehydration, overdoses. The mental health and medical systems, already strained, struggle to catch up, leaving thousands to fight battles they should never be left to fight alone. A documentary about the homeless does not seek to sensationalize these realities. It exists to reveal them, quietly, truthfully, and with compassion. Its purpose is not to shock people into pity, but to awaken a deeper understanding of what it means to lose everything in a city built on the illusion that everyone is on their way to success. It is a reminder that dignity must not depend on wealth, and that invisibility should never be a sentence handed down by society. Canada's drug crisis, the alleys of life and death, in the rain-soaked alleys of Vancouver, and in the hidden, dimly lit corners of Toronto and Montreal, another crisis unfolds, quieter than the storm of homelessness, but no less devastating. These narrow passageways, slick with drizzle and shadowed by flickering streetlights, hold a reality most Canadians never witness. Toxic substances move through these neighborhoods like invisible tides, unpredictable and increasingly lethal. They transform doorways into makeshift emergency rooms, sidewalks into triage zones, and silent brick walls into mute witnesses to a national tragedy playing out one fragile body at a time. Every morning, outreach workers step into these alleys carrying naloxone kits, oxygen tanks, protective gloves, and a kind of hope that feels thinner and more fragile with each shift. Their hands sometimes tremble, not from fear, but from the weight of exhaustion and the knowledge that in this line of work, seconds are everything. Seconds decide whether someone wakes up or slips away forever. Some rescues happen so quickly, they bypass conscious thought entirely. A sudden collapse, a syringe clattering onto wet pavement, a worker dropping to their knees in instinctive urgency. And in the middle of filming a documentary about the homeless, one volunteer said a line that has haunted everyone who heard it: "We don't count hours here, we count breaths." It wasn't poetry, it was truth. In these alleys, strangers become heroes in the most unexpected moments. Someone walking home after a late shift hears a desperate groan and immediately calls for help. A passerby kneels beside a stranger lying against a wall, speaking gently, urging them to stay awake, anchoring them to consciousness with the sound of a voice that refuses to let them drift away. A volunteer hands over warm water to steady, trembling hands, fully aware that warmth can be as vital as medicine when cold rain seeps into bones already weakened by hunger, illness, or withdrawal. These moments are small, fleeting, and almost always invisible to the rest of the world. But in those seconds, those fragile, breath-counted seconds, a life teeters on the edge. And in that razor-thin space between slipping away and holding on, human kindness becomes the lifeline. Even in the darkest corridors of the crisis, where despair settles thick in the air, where every shadow seems to hold a story of pain, there is still a stubborn, persistent glow. Kindness flickers there like a small but unyielding flame. Fragile, yes. Vulnerable, always, but defiantly alive. It burns through stigma, through fear, through the crushing weight of a nationwide emergency that claims thousands each year. And that flame, as faint as it sometimes appears, reminds us of something essential. Hope does not vanish in the shadows. It survives because ordinary people choose, every day, to keep it alive. Streets of rain, snow, and silence. Canada's winter does not arrive gently. It carves its presence into every street, every alley, every place where someone is trying to survive the night. In Vancouver, the rain falls relentlessly, sometimes for days without pause. It seeps into blankets, clothing, shoes, and tents until everything becomes heavy, cold, and impossible to dry. People try to huddle beneath overhangs or hold plastic tarps above their heads, but the rain finds its way in, turning warmth into a luxury and sleep into a gamble. Farther east in Toronto, the cold takes a different form. Frost spreads across sidewalks and bus stops, turning discarded belongings and makeshift shelters into icy sculptures. A backpack left outside stiffens like stone. A pair of gloves freezes in the shape of the hand that once wore them. These frozen objects become haunting reminders of survival, proof that someone, somewhere, is trying to hold on. And in Montreal, the winter pushes even harder. Heavy snow piles onto tents until the fabric sags, bending metal poles toward the ground. Inside, people brace their shoulders against the collapsing weight, listening to the groans of the structure above them and hoping it does not give way in the middle of the night. Every snowfall becomes a test of endurance, a quiet battle fought in complete darkness. Across these cities, every step taken in the winter streets is a battle for survival, a struggle against weather, hunger, exhaustion, and the quiet, crushing silence of being unseen. Loneliness, the invisible wound. Some people go weeks without hearing their own name spoken aloud. Their silence becomes a second skin, a weight heavier than the cold. Loneliness does not begin the moment someone loses their home. It begins much earlier, at the exact moment society stops seeing them. It grows quietly, slowly, like a bruise beneath the surface, until it becomes an invisible wound no bandage can cover. Across Canada, this wound affects many in ways that often go unnoticed. Elders in Montreal sit quietly in shelters, carrying memories no one asks about anymore. Indigenous community members in Winnipeg and Edmonton navigate a world that has taken so much from them: land, family, trust, and still expects them to carry the burden without help. Newcomers scattered across the country face isolation so deep that even a crowded room feels empty. Surrounded by bunk beds, thick blankets, and the murmurs of strangers trying to sleep, many people still feel profoundly, painfully alone. And yet, even in this emotional winter, there are pockets of warmth, small but powerful. Storytelling groups where someone finally listens, art circles where hands covered in paint rediscover the joy of creation. Peer support communities where people speak openly, laugh freely, and remember, if only for an hour, that they are more than their circumstances. In these rare spaces, people feel human again, seen, heard, valued. These moments do not erase the loneliness, but they light small fires within it, reminding each person that connection is still possible. The crisis across Canada, a nation-wide reality. The homelessness crisis in Canada is not confined to one city or one region. You can trace it across the map like a scar stretching from coast to coast. In Vancouver, tents line East Hastings, forming long rows of damp canvas that flap in the wind. People emerge from beneath soaked tarps each morning, shivering as the coastal chill settles into their bones. In Toronto, shelters overflow night after night, leaving many to sleep near subway vents, relying on bursts of warm air rising through metal grates, or taking refuge inside park structures that were never meant to be homes. And in Montreal, winter shows no mercy. At 20 degrees Celsius, every inhale feels like breathing broken glass, each breath a reminder that survival in such cold is never guaranteed. Behind these scenes lies a reality far more complicated than personal choices or isolated misfortunes. The roots of the crisis stretch deep into the foundations of the country. Rent continues rising at speeds wages cannot match, housing costs explode while paychecks do not. Severe shortages leave waiting lists months or years long. Immigration pressures increase demand on cities already struggling to provide affordable places to live. Intergenerational trauma within Indigenous communities continues to reverberate through decades of injustice. Alberta's economic downturns push families out of once secure jobs, unraveling the stability they spent years building. And across the country, social support systems, once a safety net, now contain holes too large for many to survive the fall. Together, these forces form a storm far stronger than anything one person can endure alone. It is a national crisis, woven from economic, social, and historical threads. A crisis that demands not judgment, but understanding, not silence, but action. The kitchens of compassion, warmth among the ice. Across Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Calgary, community kitchens and shelters rise like small islands of warmth in a landscape defined by cold wind and colder nights. In these places, Daily Bread, UGM, Old Brewery Mission, the Calgary Drop-In Center, long lines form long before the doors open. People wait quietly, shoulders hunched against the freezing air, their breath lifting in thin white clouds as if the cold itself were trying to swallow them. Inside, volunteers move with purpose and gentleness. They greet people by name, offering not just food, but acknowledgement. They place clean socks into trembling hands, share a soft word of encouragement, and create a moment of kindness in lives that rarely receive any. On nights when the temperature sinks to 20 degrees Celsius, a bowl of hot soup becomes more than nourishment. It is heat returning to a numbed body. It is dignity returning to a weary mind. It is hope, small, fragile, but real, placed carefully into the hands of someone who needs it to survive just one more night. A documentary about the homeless captures these scenes with quiet tenderness, refusing to overlook the power of these simple acts. It shows the humanity in every gesture, reminding us that survival is built not only on shelters or policies, but on compassion offered at the right moment. These kitchens, these volunteers, these bowls of soup, they are proof that even in a frozen world, warmth still exists. A call to action, one person can change a life. Canada stands at a profound turning point. It is a nation known for its beauty, its generosity, its wealth. Yet thousands still sleep beneath bridges, inside fragile tents that shake in winter storms, or on concrete that steals warmth from their bodies. This contradiction is impossible to ignore. But meaningful change has never relied on governments alone. Real transformation begins with ordinary people who make one simple decision: not to turn away. Across the country, communities have already shown what compassion can build when people refuse to remain silent. Hotels once filled with tourists have been transformed into safe, stable housing. Volunteers gather to assemble winter survival kits, gloves, heat packs, waterproof layers, small items that often make the difference between life and death on a freezing night. Coat drives and donation programs spread warmth one garment at a time. Storytelling campaigns on social media give a voice to those who have been invisible for too long, allowing their experiences to ripple outward and awaken empathy. Neighborhood groups stand up, advocate, write letters, attend meetings, and remind their cities that homelessness is not an unsolvable issue, it is a human issue. And through all these efforts, a message rises with unmistakable clarity. Do not look away. Do not stay silent. Do not leave people behind. Compassion begins with a single choice. One person noticing, one person caring, one person stepping forward. And sometimes that is all it takes to change the arc of another person's life. Conclusion. A question for the future. Canada is a country of breathtaking landscapes. Mountains etched in white, forests stretching endlessly, lakes calm as glass. But beneath that beauty lies a quiet suffering that most never see. Every tent tucked beneath an overpass holds a life that once felt stable. Every cold meal eaten on a street corner carries a story of jobs lost, families fractured, or illnesses no one was prepared for. Every crowded shelter hides a dream that is still fighting, desperate to survive. And yet, even in this landscape of hardship, hope still finds ways to appear. A nurse kneels on a sidewalk to bandage an open wound, her hands steady despite the wind. A volunteer hands over a blanket to someone shaking in the cold. A stranger offers warm food during a snowstorm, asking nothing in return. These small moments, quiet, gentle, often unseen, prove that compassion can exist even in the harshest winter. The next 5 years will be defined by one choice that belongs to all of us. Will Canadians choose compassion, or will they choose silence? A documentary about the homeless does not exist to accuse, shame, or divide. It exists to remind us that humanity is a shared responsibility. It exists to pull back the curtain on suffering that should never be ignored. It exists so that no one is forgotten in the cold. It exists because every life, no matter how bruised or burdened, deserves dignity. And in the end, it leaves us with one final question. A question that echoes beyond the screen, beyond statistics, beyond the winter streets. If we have the power to help, how could we choose not to?